Okay, so I'm going to start with the question that I ask every single person that I ever podcast, which is, can you please introduce yourself for all of the listeners here today?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Sana. I'm an assistant professor at York University, and I do research in usable security, which is the intersection of computer security and human-computer interaction. So I'm really interested in how we can design interactive technologies to improve people's understanding of security and different privacy issues.
Fantastic. Do you have some specific kind of examples that for people who are maybe not familiar with like the academic spaces that you're working in could kind of grasp or think around?
Yeah, so with regards to games, I'm really interested in how we can use games to teach, especially youth, about security and privacy,
Mhm.
uh, specifically some of the topics that are really nuanced or complex. I think giving them prescriptive advice on, you should do this and you should not do that really doesn't work out. But building games where students can actually come in and experience different scenarios and situations and build that critical thinking skill that they need when they go online.
Yeah.
So I think
So
that's
what is it about games that connects really well with the work that you're doing and the audiences that you want to connect it with? Like, is there something unique about games themselves?
Yeah, so when it comes to cybersecurity, games provide this simulated environment where people can try out different behaviors before they encounter them in real life. We can't put people in dangerous situations in real life and then ask them, okay, what should you do in this situation?
Mhm.
One of those things, like, we give them advice, but then when they actually get in the situation in real life, that's when they learn what they should do and what they should not do.
Right.
So the thing about that's really unique about games for security and privacy is that we can put them in these futuristic situations, right? Like simulated situations, and allow
Mhm.
them to try out different things before they encounter these things in real life.
Yeah, it's kind of like dipping your toes in
Yeah.
before kind of getting thrown face first into major cybersecurity things. So, how did you get started in this work? Has this been like a lifelong project, something that came up while you were in school, something outside of that? Where's the passion or the drive behind all this?
So I've been interested in security and privacy like throughout my graduate studies. So I did my master's in this area, but I really got into gamification or gamifying security and privacy in my PhD
Mhm.
research. So we had partnered up with MediaSmarts,
Yeah.
uh, which is a nonprofit educating youth about media literacy, digital literacy. And so that kind of is what really got me interested in developing games for youth to improve their security and privacy literacy.
And you made a variety of games with them, one specific title with them. How many games have you kind of put together in the course of all this?
Yeah, so we made one big game with them. It was over a course of, I think, 3 years. Um, so it was more of a bigger game that was deployed to classrooms.
Okay. And so, what was the game specifically targeting?
So it was targeting online security and privacy issues for tweens, which is kids between the ages of 10 to 13. And we were focusing on different issues that they might encounter when they start using social media.
Mhm.
So we were addressing issues around sharing photos and respecting people's privacy, and yeah, things like that.
So, since you're like an academic, in addition to kind of working with non-academic spaces for creating these games, I want to ask you, like, do you find that academia, which occasionally kind of flirts with the sector of game design and game making, has that been like a successful kind of partnership? Is that really hard for academia to do? Is it like something that's an easy pipeline for academics, or are there some challenges around kind of making those relationships work?
Right. So like the relationships between academic and industry partners.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's definitely challenges. I think um, in our like project, I think in the beginning, we're trying to figure out, how can we work best together because we did have very different goals, right? Like you mentioned, academia tries to flirt with gamification, but really doesn't sometimes delve too deep into it. Whereas a nonprofit organization or an industry partner, they have realistic goals. They want a game that they want to deploy.
Yeah.
Um, But I think there is something that the academics can bring to the table. So for our game, we were bringing like an empirical angle to the game. So we wanted to build something that that was effective at improving people's behavior and that we could measure if it was effective. So we brought in this aspect of user testing.
Right.
And using empirical studies to evaluate learning in games.
And that was through the game you did user testing, or that was before and like prior to the game's release?
It was during the entire development process. So we used an iterative user-centered design process where we were testing with children at every stage of the design process, from conception to like the fully developed high fidelity prototype. And so I think throughout the entire process, we did 4 user studies.
Wow, that's really cool. And so I'm kind of curious, like, do you find that academia should kind of stick to the research side of the game design space, or should they kind of fully jump into the water of making games themselves?
I think they should fully jump into the water of making games themselves. I think that's how we learn some of the issues surrounding game design.
Right.
Like when it comes to, for example, evaluation. I think evaluating a game in a real life setting is very different than evaluating a game in a lab setting, for example, right? So for our game, we had deployed it to classrooms, and I think it would be really cool if we can do like an in-context study of seeing how the game is used in real life instead of just focusing on lab-based user studies.
Well, that's really interesting. And so, I mean, that process, well, I fully agree with you that, like, I think more academics or academic spaces should be making games, doesn't come without its challenges, right? And so, like, an academia has its unique challenges for making those games. And so what kind of are the next steps that you would hope to see from academic spaces to kind of better allow games to be made within them and sent or produced from those spaces?
Oh, that's an interesting question.
It's a big question, and I'm kind of putting you on the spot with it. So I'd love to hear what you think, though.
I think we need to have more partnerships with people outside of academia who bring in different perspectives and who can actually, have the networks and means to deploy these games into real life so they can have real impact. I think in academia, sometimes we come up with these games, we test them, they're cool, we publish papers about them, but then they kind of are discarded.
Right.
We might publish them on our website and people might play them, but I think if we want real impact, they need to be deployed through either nonprofit organizations or even community organizations like libraries. I think that would be cool.
Yeah, I mean, there definitely is a problem, and we talked about this a bit yesterday, of like actually facilitating and implementing games in the spaces that they're supposed to get to. So, I mean, I think those partnerships really help kind of draw that connection that you're getting at. And I know that these interviews are meant to be short, so I'm going to ask you one final question related specifically to the event. And so the event is titled A Bad Game Arcade, because I'm kind of poking fun at, the educational tools that we create, and they don't always meet the mark. And so what would you define as a good game?
Oh, that's a good question. So what would I define as a good game? For me, a good game has two criteria. First, it's fun for the player. So the player is engaged, they're having fun. The second aspect is that learning is taking place. So we need to be able to measure if learning took place in the game, right? So I think that for me, a successful education game has those two components.
Yeah, I mean, fun and learning makes a lot of sense to kind of fit into those spaces. And so how do you think, just to kind of add kind of a question onto the end of that, how do you think we can effectively evaluate learning?
It's not easy, especially when it comes to games. So I think that's where academics can really bring in a new perspective. So we can help build tools to evaluate learning, before playing the game and after playing the game. Some of the tools that I've used is, we developed questionnaires very carefully that were assessing learning that was happening inside the game. We had developed scenarios where the students got to role play a scenario before playing the game, and they would tell us what they would do. And then we did the same thing after they played the game. And then obviously we did analysis on the data to show if learning took place.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate you kind of like breaking that down too, for anyone who's not familiar with kind of like academic processes. I mean, I've always kind of sat on the idea as like, is evaluation immediately after play always like the best solution when like we don't know how long that learning lasts? And I think that's a question that a lot of like educational game makers have. So I appreciate you kind of like bringing those to the forefront, but that does bring us to the end of our time together for now, but I will get to talk with you later tonight at the panel. So thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me in the middle of your day. And I look forward to chatting with you near the end of your day.
No problem. This was great. Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much. And then for anyone who is listening, we're going to take like a 5-minute break. We're going to swap to the next interviewee. And so drink some water, stretch your legs, and we'll be back in a few minutes. But thank you so much, Sana. And I'll see you later.
No problem. Bye.
Bye.